November 1944. The waters east of Leyte are unnaturally calm. No wind, no moon, just a flat, oily sea reflecting the faint glow of distant fires burning on occupied islands. I picture myself standing on the deck of a U.S. Navy destroyer escort, my boots vibrating faintly with the pulse of the engines, eyes fixed on the black water ahead. Every sailor around me knows the carriers will come at dawn. Everyone knows submarines are out there. But none of us are looking up. We are staring down. Because tonight, the most dangerous enemy in the Pacific is not a battleship, not an aircraft carrier, not even a submarine. It is something small enough to miss, fast enough to surprise, and deadly enough that even the largest battleship ever built feared the waters it haunted. I am a military historian, and for decades, naval warfare has been explained through giants, steel titans measured in tens of thousands of tons, their guns able to strike targets beyond the horizon. Yamato, Musashi, Iowa. Legends forged in armor plate and firepower. But war is not always decided by what is biggest. Sometimes it is decided by what is closest, quietest, and most desperate. Hidden in declassified reports, survivor testimonies, and Japanese naval planning documents is a weapon that almost never appears in popular histories. A weapon so crude it looks harmless, so small it seems laughable beside a battleship. And yet, by 1945, it had sunk U.S. ships, crippled landing operations, and turned shallow coastal waters into zones of pure psychological terror. The Japanese called it Shinyo, sea shaker. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a motorboat. 5 to 6 meters long, wooden hull, no armor, no radio, no radar. A simple gasoline engine adapted from civilian vehicles, but inside its bow sat up to 250 kilograms of high explosives, sometimes more. The pilot sat behind that charge, separated by little more than thin planking. There was no torpedo. The boat itself was the torpedo. To understand why Japan built this weapon, you must understand where Japan stood by late 1943. The Imperial Japanese Navy was no longer fighting for victory. It was fighting for delay. Carrier pilots were gone. Fuel was rationed so severely that capital ships sat idle for months. Yamato herself, designed to decide the war in a single titanic battle, had become a symbol trapped by reality. Japan could no longer match American industry. A single U.S. shipyard now produced more tonnage than the entire Japanese naval construction program. Every loss Japan suffered was permanent. Every loss America suffered was temporary. So Japan turned to arithmetic. A Shinyo boat could be built in days. It required minimal training. It consumed almost no fuel. And it could destroy a ship worth tens of millions of dollars. The cost difference alone was staggering. A Yamato-class battleship cost the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars and years of labor. A Shinyo cost roughly what it took to build a small truck. One life for one ship. That was the calculation. Technically, the Shinyo was perfectly designed for its mission. Its shallow draft allowed it to operate where destroyers feared grounding. At low speed, its engine noise blended with wave slap and shoreline sounds. At night, its silhouette disappeared entirely. American radar, designed to detect aircraft and large vessels, often filtered it out as clutter. U.S. sailors would later describe the attack pattern in eerily similar language. A calm night. No warning. Then suddenly, a white line racing across the water. Gunfire erupting too late. An explosion not above the surface, but beneath it. That was the true genius of the Shinyo. It attacked below the waterline, where ships were weakest. Even a destroyer escort, with anti-aircraft guns blazing, could do nothing once the boat crossed the final 100 yards. At full throttle, the Shinyo could reach speeds over 30 knots. At that range, reaction time vanished. The explosion did not always look dramatic from afar. There was often no towering fireball. Instead, there was a violent underwater shock. Hull plates buckled inward. Engine rooms flooded instantly. Boilers ruptured. Ships lost power, steering, and sometimes their keel integrity in seconds. One U.S. transport officer wrote after Okinawa, "It felt as if the sea itself rose up and punched us." Operational history confirms the fear was justified. During the Okinawa campaign, Shinyo units operated alongside kamikaze aircraft and coastal artillery. They targeted transports, landing ships, and destroyers, screening the invasion fleet. American records credit Shinyo attacks with multiple confirmed sinkings and dozens of damaged vessels. Many incidents were initially misattributed to mines until survivors described seeing a boat at the last moment. What made Shinyo uniquely terrifying was not just its lethality, but its human certainty. Unlike torpedo boats or submarines, there was no retreat. The pilot's mission ended at impact. This created a psychological effect unlike anything U.S. sailors had encountered at sea. Destroyer crews slept at battle stations. Searchlights scanned the water endlessly. Gunners fired at floating debris, driftwood, even shadows. Ammunition consumption skyrocketed. Morale eroded. The ocean, once a place of distance and maneuver, became claustrophobic. Even the Japanese understood the irony. Internal Navy documents acknowledged that Shinyo units would suffer near-total losses. Pilots were often reservists, fishermen, coastal volunteers, men who knew the water intimately. Some believed deeply in sacrifice. Others recorded quiet resignation. One pilot wrote before departure, "I will not return. Please forgive me for being born into this time." And yes, Yamato feared it. Not because Yamato was likely to be sunk by a Shinyo directly, but because Shinyo represented the kind of war Yamato could not fight. Yamato was built for range, visibility, and decisive firepower. Shinyo thrived in darkness, proximity, and chaos. In confined waters, Yamato's massive guns could not depress low enough. Her armor meant nothing against a point-blank underwater explosion. By 1944, Japanese escort doctrine explicitly warned of small craft threats in coastal zones. Even the largest ships were instructed to remain offshore, screened by destroyers, precisely because a single small attacker could cripple them beyond repair. In comparison to American PT boats, the difference was philosophical. PT boats were meant to strike and escape. Shinyo boats were meant to end. German explosive boats existed in Europe, but none were produced or deployed on the scale Japan attempted. Shinyo was not a stopgap. It was doctrine. By the end of the war, thousands had been built. And still, it was not enough. This is the brutal truth history demands we accept. Shinyo delayed landings. It killed sailors. It damaged ships. But it could not stop the tide. American industry absorbed the losses. Replacement ships arrived. Crews rotated. The invasion continued. On 7th April 1945, Yamato sailed on her final mission toward Okinawa. She never reached the invasion fleet. Hundreds of American aircraft found her first. Torpedoes struck again and again. Bombs punched through her decks. She capsized and exploded, taking over 3,000 men with her. But as she sailed, Japanese planners still feared the same thing they had built themselves: small attackers, striking where even giants were helpless. When I study the Shinyo today, I do not see a tiny boat. I see a warning. That power does not always scale upward. That technology does not guarantee safety. That desperation can produce weapons that rewrite fear itself. For U.S. sailors, Shinyo was not a machine. It was a thought that haunted the water. For Japan, it was the final arithmetic of war. And for history, it is proof that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not the biggest one, but the one that arrives quietly, too close, and cannot be stopped. That is why it worked. That is why it was feared. And that is why, even in the shadow of Yamato, the smallest boat earned its place in naval history,